Back to Jacksonville, here to make my mark on the TCG universe. Let's go. Kia ora, Yuanji, and the rest of the Fab fam. What's going on, bro?
What's up, Saint? We're not in our usual filming location. So where are you?
I am currently in Auckland, New Zealand, right by the Viaduct Harbor. That's the harbor in the central business. Oh, look at that. Do you see that?
Yeah,
That water's gorgeous.
beautiful.
Visit New Zealand. This place, we could make this a whole Visit New Zealand ad, but I wouldn't do it justice. I wouldn't do this place justice just by saying you need to visit New Zealand. It is paradise on earth, and it is amazing.
hmm So we're here to do our regularly scheduled program last month today.
Last month today.
Yeah,
Talk about TCGs and whatnot.
yeah. So
Give a little all right, because we're FaBled hunters. And what else is up, man? We just got to cover all the nuances of TCGs, right?
yeah, so a couple of things happened in Flesh and Blood, but let's go over some non-Flesh and Blood related stuff. I know that you went on a trip kind of recently to go to Magicon Las Vegas, and that's also
Yes.
where they were holding the Magic Worlds tournament.
That's correct. That's correct. I have an episode of FaBled Hunters scheduled, but Magicon was much improved over the Magic 30 event of 2022. And although it was, typical money grubbing moves by Wizards of the Coast to try to extract every single dollar out of every vendor, out of every attendee, I just have to say that, they rolled out the red carpet, they pulled out all the stops, and they literally held an event that I don't know if it can be surpassed by any other TCG within the next 3 years. Normally, Magic Fests, from what I remember, are just a small corner of like the Vegas Convention Center hall.
Yeah,
And Magic Con was literally like the whole south wing of the Vegas Convention Hall, and then an upstairs area, and then a private Black Lotus VIP area. And just a quick plug to Spencer at Magnolia Games, because he knows that I hate giving Wizards of the Coast my money.
yeah.
He hooked me up with an exhibitor badge. So I literally paid literally zero to attend the event. But I remember there was decorations of like Huatli and the dragon, or the dinosaur from Ixalan. There was the TARDIS phone booth from Doctor Who. There was an Eldraine decoration and whatever. And there was also like a suspended 30-foot Shivan dragon on the second floor. There was cosplayers. They really had a lot. I mean, even there was an after party, which I'm not sure if many people attended.
I saw some of the videos of the after party on social media.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like
I saw them setting up, and they were shooing me away. They were like, in order to watch Elijah Wood and his no-name band play and stay here, you need to pay us $50. And I'm like, bro, cocky, bro. I'm just trying to, like, help my friends pack up the booth and get the fuck out of here.
yeah.
Like, I don't want to give you $50. I don't even like Elijah Wood, right? Like Samwise Gamgee, and Gandalf. Those are the real heroes, and of course Aragorn. Like everybody other than Frodo were the heroes of the Fellowship of the Ring and the Lord of the Rings series, not Elijah Wood. So, anyway, sorry, that's just my little LOTR rant.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did that, and that was money grubbing as hell. And I know from personal experience that there were not very many sales at Magic 30, meaning the vendors were not really selling that much. They were buying so much more. There was just not just an ocean, like, an avalanche of oceans worth of supply trying to flood into the market. and there was just not enough cash to even buy the amount of dual lands. There was not enough cash to buy the amount of Power 9 that was being offered to to vendors at this Magicon. So I don't know. That's a sign. I just want to try to be objective here. That's a sign of where MTG is today.
Hmm.
But that event, I heard from each vendor that they sold out some days. Maybe they sold out all 3 days, but 15,000 unique attendees was the capacity, and they at least sold out one or two or maybe all three of those days.
Okay. Sounds like it
Yeah.
was a fun event. I did want to talk about some of the surrounding discourse that I saw online regarding worlds, and I wanted to see kind of your take on it.
I got a
So
little tidbit too, but yeah, we can do your part first.
yeah,
Sure.
so well, let's do your part first because mine might be a little bit negative skewed.
Oh, mine's even more negative skewed.
Okay,
So
all right.
let's
So
do your
yeah,
MTG
so
part.
I saw. So I guess from your perspective as a event goer, that the event was ran much better than the last MagicCon.
Yep.
But I did hear there was a lot of discourse on Magic Twitter, and I think like it was like pretty much dominated. Basically, everything that I saw talking about Worlds wasn't really talking about how good the event was, other than I guess this video of the kind of the concert thing that I saw. But a lot of people were talking about how there was like a couple of well-known cheaters who were competing at Worlds,
Hmm.
and I think that I just wanted to hear your take. You know, I mean, like you used to compete in Magic the Gathering a long time ago. I compete in Flesh and Blood regularly. I
Yeah.
I think it's like a difficult balance, right? That Wizards of the Coast has to find between catering to their like casual demographic, hosting like great events, and then also I think having like a robust, organized play system that gives the competitors a lot of confidence in fair games being played.
Since you're going down that route, I mean, the most prolific Magic the Gathering pro that I know was Brian Weissman. He literally made the deck.
Hmm.
And I remember, I'm not trying to single him out, but I remember to me, he's like the Michael Jordan of Magic the Gathering. And even he got caught cheating, I believe, at a charity event where he added additional like Circle of Protection reds or something. I mean, we can find the article and we can seek out the receipts. But
Yeah.
I mean, if even Mr. Weissman has been, caught red-handed, then right, like imagine that Michael Jordan, in the Bulls era, like bet on his own team and took the fall and like
Yeah,
had an
yeah.
off game. That would be a blemish. That would be like a Lance Armstrong level blemish to his reputation, and it would also hurt the sport or the hobby. So that's nothing new. I know that in Flesh and Blood, there was, some controversy. One of your friends, let's not mention names, in the second Pro Tour, Leal, right? And cheating was a concern, but maybe bullying or aggressive play or taunting is okay, but I don't believe that cheating actually happened or that an individual got away with cheating. And thankfully, the biggest known cheater that I remember was at the Taiwan Calling, the finals, I believe,
Hmm.
where he was disqualified, where Starvo, I think, had some amulets or something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Two
yeah.
talismans. Was it? I think it was a Starvo
It,
player,
it
was it
was it
not?
was a chain player getting hit by Oakenold.
Hit by Starvo,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure. And I think it's already a little too far gone for Magic to come back in terms
Hmm.
of competitive play and in terms of credibility.
Yeah.
But MTGs just become a cash grab and they will run their competitive circuit because Flesh and Blood is doing it and Hasbro doesn't want to be outdone. So I believe that the spirit of gathering and Magic the Gathering in terms of organized play is just a husk of its former self. And hey, I tried to lead the event topic on a positive note, and I tried to be as objective as possible.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you asked my subjective opinion
yeah.
on organized play, Magic, and I mean something that's just antiquated and no longer a thing that many people take seriously, other
Well,
than the ones trying to make money.
yeah, well, I brought it up because I wanted to kind of like give balance, I guess, to all the people who like their only exposure to Magicon or to the Worlds event was like the negativity that they saw on social media. I wanted like your like firsthand experience of
Okay,
how like the event was.
the event itself, going booth to booth, a lot of people were fearful. There's a lot of FUD in the room on premise, but I felt that all the vendors were just trekking on forward. They still believed that there was hope in their endeavors of selling Magic,
Hmm.
and that's why they bought as much as they literally could.
Yeah.
And it's in a rough place right now. I did try to promote Flesh and Blood to a couple of the vendors just to encourage them because that's my duty as an ambassador.
Were they hearing
And
it?
they were thinking about it. I reached out to some folks locally. I hit up Spencer. You don't need to convince him to sell Flesh and Blood, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because he's McNilly. He's already huge. But some of the other ones, Purple Mana was doing something with I think Mana Mix or something like that. But Purple Mana Anchor, he's ramping up a portal for Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
Some of the APAC vendors, they had their reservations about Flesh and Blood, and it's really sad. Like, this is honest. It's a black eye, and I'll admit it as an avid FaB fan. They talked about that Monarch debacle and
Oh,
how
yeah,
everything
yeah.
happened, and
Hmm.
they're like, Monarch, just left a bad taste in my mouth. We went in to Monarch. We were trying to make some business. And then we were stuck with Monarch, and then some of us we dumped Monarch. Despite the global price going up to 500 or 600 US dollars a box.
Yeah.
Takes card shop dead. But yeah, that was one of the concerns that was brought up a couple times, like two, three times from two, three separate vendors.
Okay.
Because I'm just trying to, get a heat check. It's like, oh, if FaB's so bad, what's going on? They're like, you got any Lorcana? And I'm just like, oh my God, Lorcana. What's the matter with you? They're like, yo, we know the negativity, but there's money to be made in Lorcana, and there's a bunch of dumb parents willing to spend anything for Elsas and Mickeys and Little Mermaids. So
Yeah.
these conversations literally happened. It was like 5 days in Vegas, so a
Yeah.
lot of talking and hanging was done.
Yeah, on the topic of Lorcana, now that the game's been out for a while, I have noticed pretty much like every store that I go to, and maybe you can talk about whether or not this is true from if there were any vendors there that either carried Lorcana or from talking to them. I find that switching topics, I find that Lorcana is actually like pretty difficult to buy even still, and that there's a lot of
Yeah,
demand for it.
there is.
And
There is.
I think we're in this situation where I don't know. It's kind of weird because I hear that Lorcana has like a ton of interest, but anecdotally, a lot of the Lorcana events that I hear about, where like the majority of the attendees are like 20 plus.
Okay.
So I don't know. I would imagine that the target demographic should be like school age children or like maybe slightly older, kind of similar to around the time probably like that you and I got into Magic.
Yeah, I
Um,
totally believe it. It's a different target market, and if Disney makes $1 trillion, good for them. But yeah, you were saying?
yeah, I was just saying I think that there's like a strange disconnect from like the stories that I've been hearing and maybe like the intention. So I am curious to see how that develops out as the product becomes more available over time.
If I may, I'd like just one last word on the collectability of Lorcana.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
would say that all of the people that came in from that Mon to 1K, that flavor of collector or that flavor of enthusiast,
Yeah,
TCG enthusiast, all the ones that pumped up MetaZoo, all the ones that were flooding Walmarts and Targets to buy Pokemon when it was all the rage. It feels like those are the individuals that are creating a glut in the Lorcana demand market and creating artificial demand. And, you know, I don't want to be like, say what people were saying about Flesh and Blood 2 years ago, like one person selling to another and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
going back and forth. But it really feels like that because you know a game needs to be played, and not a lot of people seem to be playing Lorcana. A trading card game or a collectible card game needs to be collectible, and with the authentication difficulties, like you know being that the majors, PSA and BGS, are not even willing to authenticate our grade Lorcana, that's a huge hit to collectability.
Hmm.
You know, you can't really hold sealed product because there is no seal on the boxes. All of those things that I believe we've mentioned in prior
Yeah,
last month day episodes
sure.
is uh, is a concern.
Yeah, I think the
Moving
last
a little bit because the sun's coming out.
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'll say about that is I am curious when because they're not scheduled to start organized play for I think about a year, and I'm
Okay.
curious when they do start if we're gonna see more, I guess, like organic demand. I do want to say that I have heard that at LGS's, like the attendance for Lorcana events is pretty high, but I'm not sure if a lot of that is driven kind of by, like by like the craze for promo cards or whatnot. That I don't know, but I am curious. Like when you have a game that is targeted towards children, that a lot of the conventional knowledge about collectability or whatnot kind of gets thrown out the window.
It does.
If you look at Pokemon, like Pokemon boxes are like terrible EV, but it still sells because of the strength of the IP.
Yep. Like
And
the little feeble princess, you know, having an unlimited appetite to consume Pokemon boxes.
yeah, yeah,
Almost takes after somebody we know, right?
yeah. Cool. Do you have any other non-Flesh and Blood related news that you want to go over before we jump into Flesh and Blood?
Oh, there's one little point. The
Yeah.
ultra negativity about Magicon.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It was at Magicon at one of the booths. I think it was a Mint MTG card, and I was transacting roughly 2,200 alpha cards or trying to create a consignment. And I won't get into specific details because I will be making a Fabled Hunters video spotlighting this. But I was ambushed by multiple people. One of them being Jeff Ferreira, who we made a video about.
Oh, yeah.
Another one being, yeah, Joel Mick. And they tried to call me out. They called me a liar. They said that I was unfair to them. And Joel Mick said I was poisonous to the MTG community. It's
Okay.
like, yes, you are such great paragons of your Magic the Gathering community that you are shills for a false, a fraudulent grading company. You're shills for essentially private equity, Blackstone,
Yeah.
and you'll put anything that they're willing to put your name on to try to make a quick buck. But not only that, those are my opinions. I'll be making a video about their actions and about actionable evidence. I normally wouldn't go after people individually in the TCG community unless they gave me a reason to,
Yeah.
right? Like Card Chop Dead and John Sasso and
Hmm.
them. I'll spare the C word this time. These individuals, they also aren't at the power level or threat level of deserving the C word, but they're a bunch of crooked twats, and they need to be put in their place. They tried to suggest that the alpha product that I was trying to transact, trying to consign, were either hot goods or I had borrowed them or they were not my cards. I guarantee you guys, all of my alpha Magic the Gathering cards are my cards. There's 5 figures more singles in terms of volume, in terms of not dollar amount, like physical single cards. 20, 30,000 cards where that came from.
Yeah.
And you're going to try to threaten me, especially in public, especially at an event where with so many eyeballs around and you're trying to scuttle my deal, then things can get really personal really, really quickly. So I'll just leave it at that. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah, let's talk about Flesh and Blood. So, I think September, a lot of stuff actually happened in the background. October this month is going to be kind of a crazy month with regards to events, but I think September there's a lot of like build up into that. So I wanted to start by saying first there was a ban and suspend announcement on September 19th.
Oh yeah,
And, like a lot of content creators have already talked about this at length. Basically, it's like
nothing happened, right?
well,
I
yeah,
thought
well,
nothing.
yeah, not a lot of changes. Some people said that it's for the best just to get Lexi and potentially Icelander out of the format. Some people wanted, Lexi to take like a power hit. I think there were a lot of little gems that were written in the ban and suspended announcement. So I think,
Gems. Sure,
yeah, I
sure.
think the first thing that the ban and suspend announcement did well, in my opinion, was kind of set the expectation for Worlds. So, the way that the Flesh and Blood Living Legend system works, it only updates every time there's a ban and suspended announcement. So, a lot of people that I talked to who are going to Worlds were concerned whether or not Lexi would be legal for Worlds or if there was going to be another ban and suspend announcement, like shortly before the event. I think we had experience with that right before Pro Tour 1, so I think a ban list came out like a couple of weeks before the event as well for that event, and it was kind of like a scramble for everybody. And I think that they kind of addressed that by saying that they weren't going to make any card changes, and the only thing that the next ban and suspend announcement would do is update if Lexi, hits Living Legend, potentially Icelander. I actually look. Dash might also hit Living Legend.
Really?
Yeah, Dash is about like 350 points away, and there's 1,400 points up for grabs during this season before Worlds.
Wow.
So
Okay.
like a lot of things can change from between now to Worlds, but I like that they addressed the fact that there wouldn't be any like card changes, and it would just be
Okay.
you know
Let me just chime in because
yeah,
I
go
don't
ahead.
have a lot of normally into competitive play.
Yeah, go ahead.
But my little proud moment is that I spent an hour at JFK hanging out with Brian Gottlieb,
Oh yeah.
and I think Brian. I mean, he flew into New Zealand as well. We were both here for a very significant LSS wedding. Shout out to Newson Zhang. We'll talk more about that in a second.
Yeah.
And Brian Gottlieb was like, "Hey man, I think it's already made rather obvious, but we on the dev side have already done the math, and it is nearly a mathematical impossibility, given normal, tendencies of play, that Lexi does not Living Legend.
Yeah.
And I think we were already very clear about that. But I mean, those words, it's like near mathematical impossibility. Like literally, if everybody stopped playing Lexi, that would probably be the only way Lexi doesn't get her last 100 or so points, right?
I wonder if that's how they felt about Briar when she like got left at 998. But
That's a fair point, man. That's
yeah,
a fair point.
no, but I hear that. I wanted to not to derail the talk about the ban suspended announcement, but also like, are you going to release a video, or did you want to talk a little bit about your interaction with Brian at the airport?
I don't know that I'm going to make a video, but I'm glad to discuss. What about the interaction
Yeah, just
with his wife? And we didn't want to keep it too much
no,
about his work.
no.
Yep.
I just wanted to bring it up because like I think Brian is at least like publicly facing the person behind the ban and suspend announcement. Obviously, there's a whole team of devs and people working on it, but
Yep.
he's the one who catches the most flack. So I just wanted to get a sense from you, like having kind of talked to him about the game, if you felt that the game was being stewarded correctly.
Wow, that's okay. That's a potent question, and that's something that I can definitely answer without any hesitation.
Yeah.
Let me just say that Brian has, in my eyes, always been a legend in the Magic the Gathering community.
Hmm.
And he's really well known. He was a commentator, I believe. He was a writer at some point,
Yeah.
I think, for Starts of the Games. And unlike the other people, the other scumbags mentioned, I don't believe that he has any negative history in terms of cheating or in terms of shilling or
Yeah.
in terms of scamming. So he's a clean slate. Great guy, former lawyer with a great head on his shoulders. And in order for somebody to give up high ranking position at a prestigious law firm to get into the space of TCGs, they must really love what they're doing. And I think this is the case. I literally after boarding my plane, my flight, I texted like three people in the Flesh and Blood community who I feel their opinions mattered. And that's not that many people, by the way, but I texted three people and I was like, you know what? This game is in a really great place. Like, we didn't preempt this. We didn't talk about this, but I literally had that feeling. I was like, James knows how to pick them.
Yeah.
And the people in James's team know exactly what the vision is. They're self-motivated. They know exactly what they're doing. And there was, even from you, Yuanji, you even from you in the
Yeah.
sidelines before release, there was like, this set is so bad. What are
Yeah,
they doing?
we'll talk about the set release in a
What are they
second.
doing for the players?
Yeah.
Man, it looks like everything's unplayable. This is a net zero of FaB. Nobody's going to buy this set. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to drag you through the mud, but you kind of had a little bit of that tinge or that
Yeah.
flavor of negativity.
No, definitely.
And I went into detail. I was like, Brian, what about the people that are negative? He's like, saying, I don't care about the people that are negative today. Everybody's going to have an opinion in TCGs, but we have a vision that we need to execute for the betterment of the Flesh and Blood community and for the betterment of LSS. And he said, hey, if the same 500 people go to nationals or the same 1,000 people go to every calling and 1,500 people, let's say, go to worlds and they beat each other up, then one day it's going to drop down to 250 or 500 or, eventually it'll dwindle down.
Yeah.
We're doing this. And once in a while, you got to, create a set to attract critical mass and build up the fan base and the player base of Flesh and Blood. And we're thinking long term. We're thinking years out, not, oh my God, what am I gonna play for Worlds or what am I gonna play at the next calling?
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
paraphrasing a little bit. He's a little kinder. He's a former attorney, so
Yeah.
he's a little more diplomatic. But I'm paraphrasing what he said, and after hearing that, I was like, I even tested him. I shit tested him a little bit. I was like, oh, when did you start? What about Outsiders? What about Uprising? What about Dusk Till Dawn? And he had all the answers. He had everything down pat. I didn't mention that you and I talked, and you gave me that assessment. I hope I'm not sharing too much sauce. The Fabled Runaways assessment that Dromai is the biggest counter to New Prism. I think that's not a secret anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was basically like, in testing, we didn't predict that Dromai would be 20x% of the meta. And because Dromai is 20x% of the meta, that suppressed Prism and Dusk Till Dawn. Outsiders, we fully knew that, Ranger would get buffed up. And Lexi, look, this is proven by Lexi and this and that. And he just walked it all the way back to, I believe, Tales of Aria was where he started, learning the ropes and getting involved. And I was like, holy crap, you guys literally know everything that you produce. You guys are meticulous, and you guys have caught up from those Tales of Aria where New Zealand was in lockdown, those days where they were behind, and they just produced an overpowered set. Two, look, we're looking a year forward. We're already on everything. 2024 is already planned out. Everything's fine. We already, it's planned out. We'll release it within days, but we'll still give our community, call it 6 months notice about every major event as we, handle the venues and whatnot. But the cities are set, the detail is set, the schedule is set.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can you tell me where Worlds is? No, Saint. But
yeah. I wanted to. I think we'll touch on that topic later because James.
Does that answer your question about Brian?
Yeah. I just want. I've always felt pretty positive about Brian, but I just wanted. For the viewers who might not be, privy to what kind of a person Brian is, and all they see is the negativity thrown at his way on social media.
I spent another whole day with him at Newsom Ding's wedding, and he was just chill. His wife Janelle was just amazing. They were just friendly as hell. We were talking about all sorts of crap. After the wine started popping out, we even got into politics and nobody's feelings got hurt, surprisingly. And I convinced Brian to open up some antiquities packs, which is going on, Richard's channel,
Oh,
Magic to
okay.
Millions.
Sounds great.
Yeah, just fun times all around.
All
Really
right.
great guy.
This is kind of a little detour from the rest of the Vanna Suspend announcement. Uh,
Oops.
yeah, oops. Briar Living Legend did with the last Vanna Suspend announcement. So she's
Yep.
finally gone. And I think to your point about, LSS kind of moving forward from Tales of Aria, I think we're almost there.
Yep.
Oldham and
100
Briar
points
are
away.
gone. Lexi's basically on her way out. The
Yep.
next update for Flesh and Blood that we have is basically there was a spoiler season that we participated in. They pushed some lore updates to the main website, and we were talking before when we were filming our spoiler video
Yep.
about whether or not it would make sense for a world of fantasy combat and magic to incorporate these robots and guns and technology and stuff. And I think that they have done a pretty good job of kind of integrating everything lore wise. I don't know if you've read much into it or if you looked at some of the new cards, but it was confirmed that Teklo Vossen is basically maybe in cahoots with the monastery.
Oh, really?
The new Marvel Teklo Vossen Singularity is kind of like a transform card. Similar to Levia.
Except he's Iron Man.
Transforming into Plasmafet, you have Teklo Vossen transforming into like the Meklo.
Iron Man.
Yeah,
Iron
yeah,
Man.
yeah. But he's a shadowy Iron Man, so he actually has the
Okay.
official shadow talent tag on his demi hero.
Okay.
So there might be some shadow magic powering the technology. So I think that they've done a good job, weaving in like a cohesiveness in their story and in the world building to account for the fact that there's magic, there's swords, hammers, whatever, but there's also guns and
Hey,
robots.
if Ridley Scott can handle it, then I'm very confident that LSS can handle it. And speaking of storytelling, I just wanted to mention this. I know we're going on tangents, but this is very relevant.
Hmm.
Just recently, I believe on the 2nd of October in New Zealand would be the 1st of October in the US. Um, Legend Story Studios was recognized by the New Zealand International Business Awards 2023 for excellence in brand storytelling, brought to you by New Zealand Story, the division of New Zealand responsible for storytelling. There are 6 finalists, and Legend Story Studios was recognized as one of these 6 finalists. So fingers crossed. Hope they can take down another, feather in their cap. It's already a feather in their cap, but I mean, I believe in their ability to weave stories and build worlds, and I hope they take it down in November. So good luck, LSS.
Yeah, good luck, LSS. I've always said to you, I think in private, that I thought that kind of like storytelling and having lore and having good aesthetics is really important to capturing not the super hardcore fan base.
Yeah, we've agreed on this.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and
I've told you the significance of the artwork of Side Boob Special. That tells a story too.
Yeah, you gotta hit all the bases.
Yep, for sure. Which
So
forgotten. But yeah.
So I'm hoping that they continue to make really good strides in this aspect as well as they have been so far. So Bright Lights, the set, now that we can talk about it, has officially pre-released. I think it will release at the end of the week that we're filming this. And I wanted to, because you brought it up, I want to talk about my personal emotional arc going through looking at all the spoilers, looking at the set, and then having the set released and talking about that. So I think that I had messaged you, man, right after all the spoilers were gone. I was like, oh man, I think this set is going to be Dragon's Maze. And, I'm not completely off base because even in an interview later on that James White did with I Have Aphidia, the French YouTube channel,
I know the video. I got 20
Yeah,
minutes in.
yeah.
This
Even
thing.
he
Yep,
mentions, and I'm pretty sure, I bet, like when you were talking to Brian, like he mentioned as well, like they're intentionally like powering down all of the sets. Like my perspective is skewed as somebody who's like very into the competitive aspect of Flesh and Blood.
for sure.
That I'm putting myself in the shoes if I was starting the game today and I was starting the game by playing the heroes that are featured in like the newer sets, it would leave a sour taste in my mouth knowing that like on a tournament competitive basis, it's difficult maybe to make some of the heroes work, at least historically that they've released in the last couple of sets. I'm talking Dust Till Dawn and Outsiders. But I don't know, like I've since walked back on my Dragon's Maze comment. I don't think that the set is Dragon's Maze. I think ultimately Bright Lights is a very fun set to play, which
Okay.
I guess if we're talking about it in the context of it being a Flesh and Blood being a game, is probably the most important thing, right?
It is.
That
I
the
would say so.
that the set is fun to play. So I don't know how like about the tournament viability or everything at this moment, but I think that Legend Story Studios have not like hit a home run, but I think Bright Lights is a very solid set,
Okay.
and it hits on a lot of bases. I think it sets up a good image for like what their future level of complexity that they're okay with being, because Bright Lights is not a simple set for everybody who was playing at the pre-release.
Hmm.
Even experienced Flesh and Blood players found it a little bit difficult to understand kind of everything in the context of how we're accustomed to seeing the game. Flesh and Blood, the more you get experience with it, the more kind of like it seems like a little intimidating at first. I'm sure like you experience it as well, like going to higher level events. It can be kind of confusing to know what you've done, but then
Heck
when
yeah.
somebody like shows you like the ropes, like I'm sure you did like your training session with Professor Tarek, and he shows you, he's like, I
Yep.
was saying, just like do XYZ, count to 14 or whatever, like he was like telling you, then the game like simplifies down a lot. And I think Bright Lights kind of adds a little bit of complexity back into the game, which, there's a lot more different axes that people have to think about. The card's a little bit harder to evaluate at face value. So I think in that aspect, Bright Lights is probably the first set in my mind that has kind of hit the creative juices on a similar level to what Magic the Gathering has done in the past. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I feel that Magic the Gathering deck building, there's a lot of creativity. There's kind of figuring out it's like a puzzle. You have all these like puzzle pieces. You don't know like whether they're gonna like go together, and most of the time they don't. Most of the time they're bad. But then somebody puts together, like Storm or like whatever, and
Okay.
it's like all these things that don't really make sense together, and then it creates this like crazy powerful deck. And that's kind of not necessarily on the same level, but that's kind of how I feel about Bright Lights and like the development.
Knowing what I know about the few spoilers that I looked at and
Yeah.
just having a bird's eye view of Bright Lights, the flavor reminds me of, I would have to say, like a Dark Steel, Magic the
Mm-hmm.
Gathering Dark Steel, where it's all about like equipment and there's some artifacts and there's that new mechanic, I think modular, where you move things back and forth and move +1/+1 counters back and forth.
Yeah.
Like the equipment feels like modular, that modular, um, that mechanic for me. And that's just what the flavor of the set really feels like. And it's good that they're just disrupting the status quo. It's not just, oh look, it's a new hero, they've got this talent and that's it. It's like, oh, there's all the stuff you do with your equipment and the equipment evolves and there's conditions when you play this card and then there's two or three things you can do with the card. And I think it's just very interesting and it makes for very compelling gameplay. I obviously don't have nearly as much time these days as like every day in New Zealand has been a 16 to 20-hour day.
Yeah.
Last week was a 22-hour day because I had to handle a whole bunch of stuff in New York, make content. And then by the time like I was about to turn in, New York started calling me again
It
for, CEO stuff.
never ends.
And Like it just never ends. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
But I'm loving it. That said, back to bright lights. I want to just point this out. I always look at things in the long term, and that's why our Patreon is called the long game, because we're in it for the long game.
Yeah.
And if you look at this set is focusing on just one hero or one class, which is mech,
Yeah.
and we haven't had that much needed power up to mech ever since Arcane Rising, I would say, right? Because I would say Crucible was equal to all 8 classes at the time, Crucible of War, right?
Yeah.
And Arcane Rising was the inception of mech. Like this is the biggest boost to the mech's, world and skill set
Hmm.
since its original set.
Yeah, I would agree.
And it's focused on one. And the last set was focused on Rangers and Ninjas, right? The last main set.
And
We're not
assassins.
right?
And
No,
assassins.
assassins, but like it was a new assassin, and then assassin
Yeah.
got their second set worth of cards.
Yeah.
But there was a 2/3 or 67% focus on Rangers and Ninjas,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And Rangers and Ninjas, Ranger was in Arcane, right? Set 2. So 2 of the 4
Yeah.
are already addressed. And then Ninja was in the first set, Welcome to Wraith.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised, given like there's the Light Warrior helmet and there's a nice, beautiful lady on the new Light Warrior helmet,
Yeah.
that they go back to Warrior very soon,
Uh-huh.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Because everybody keeps talking about like Dorinthia going Super Saiyan. I've got a vested interest in making Dorinthia playable again.
Yeah.
Make Dorinthia playable again.
I think they probably will revisit, like Warrior, probably like Warrior
Yeah.
Brutes.
Warrior Brute, exactly.
Yeah.
They'll go back to it. And I mean, I would say Guardian has had a lot of help already, but if they made a Warrior Brute Guardian set upcoming, that would not surprise me at all, because I think they're rolling it back and they're very dedicated to everything that they do. They're not trying to like overpower creep everything. And if anything, I think they saw the disruptive and detrimental results of Tales of Aria not being fully thought out. It was an overpowered set. It was ahead of its time by a
Yeah.
little too much. I would say Monarch was already slightly ahead of its time and slightly like pushed the boundaries a little too much between Chain and Prism One,
Yeah.
right? So
I think for people who talk about like the sets being overpowered or whatnot, I think one aspect that they feel like the end effects, but they don't like really go into it, is that, and this is like what I was talking about bright lights earlier, where there's like layers to trying to put the puzzle together. I
yep.
think probably Tales of Aria and Monarch are a little bit just like too on the nose when it comes to like the power level, where it's just like, hey, like,
Yeah.
do X get bigger number?
Well, exactly. Monarch came out, and I was like, "How the hell am I, Dorinthia, with 4 cards and an arsenal, if I'm lucky enough,
Yeah.
going to face off Chain, who has potentially a hand of like 8 to 9 cards with their Banish Zone?
Yeah, and
Like,
then
how
they
am I
get like a
supposed to do that?
six
And then,
defense armor.
yeah, it's 6 defense armor and the Seeds of Agony, like drop, 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 and all these things that give me like arcane damage. And sorry, man, I'm getting all PTSD about it.
Yeah.
Versus Chain and Prism. But it was just surprising. It was really surprising. It was a huge boost.
Yeah, so I think like the more that they kind of play into creating like little mini games for all of the decks, I think it'll probably make the overall the game like a little bit more interesting. I wanted to move on from Bright Light's release to talk about another release that just happened on the same weekend. Round the Table, which is a social play Flesh and Blood product, got released. Tolarian Community College.
Professor.
Yeah, Tolarian Community College professor has had a role kind of consulting for them for LSS while in the development of this product. He's also released a series of videos talking about it, some of which have, honestly been pretty well received. I looked at the view counts. I think he gets like on average about like 100 and something thousand views for his Magic the Gathering related content.
Yep.
And most of the Round the Table product content like goes between like 40 to 50,000 views,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is pretty. It's small in comparison to Magic the Gathering, but when you think about it in terms of relative player base, relative audience, I think is pretty good for the future of the game. I've heard a lot of stories about people picking up or being willing to try Flesh and Blood for the first time because of a product like Round the Table.
Or people that just like the professor and want to have the professor card too.
Yeah, and Professor did a video with three of his Magic the Gathering content creator friends, Kyle Hill, Amy the Amazonian, and Cedric Phillips. And, like the kind of enthusiasm that they have for playing Flesh and Blood in a non-competitive setting, I hope that more content like this gets made. I hope that Round the Table kind of spurs people who want to explore Flesh and Blood in a non-competitive way. I'm always going to be like pretty into competitive Flesh and Blood, but
of course,
I recognize the importance, of making a good ecosystem as well for people who want to engage in the game, the world, the characters, not in like a tournament setting, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I also asked because I was concerned as an enthusiast of LSS. I had James sitting literally to my right a couple days ago. I was like, James, how are the sales of the TCC Round the Table?
Yeah.
And he's like, they're good. I was like, could you tell me more? And he's like, anecdotally, Saint, if you wanted to gauge the health of this product, you could just go on TCG Player and check the sold listings.
Yeah.
I was like, James, but you've got data that's much further along than that, right? He's like, of course I do.
He doesn't want to give you the sauce.
And then I was like, so? And he's like, let's get back to the wedding, Saint. And I was like, I got shot down. I got shot down by Brian Gottlieb to my left. And I got shot down by James White to my right. But I tried. That said, the reason for me, setting this up is because I did, just before us filming, go on to TCG Player.
Yeah.
And I tried to count how many TCG Round the Tables were sold on TCG Player.
Yeah.
And I got to about page 25. Then I was like, there's no way I'm going to count all this stuff.
Yeah.
Basically 28 full screen pages of transactions happening. And it's like 20 something boxes per page. So presumably just on TCG Player alone, like 600 plus, 550, 600 plus TCCs have been sold.
Yeah.
And again, I just have to say, and I reiterate what Rudy says, that the vast majority, probably 80-20, are done, transactions of sealed are done within the community, within the local game stores, within the large sellers. So I easily believe that many, many thousands, if not eventually tens of thousands of these TCC boxes will go out. And if they have a similar impact, or I hope they have a better impact than what we were doing with our, welcome decks. Because we still have commenters saying, "Oh, I remember your welcome decks. Thank you so much for your welcome decks. Go to events. Oh, 3 years ago you gave me a welcome deck, and now I'm playing Flesh and Blood."
Yeah.
And, that's what got me in. And I really hope that Brian the Professor, his product, will do this for the community. I'm going to buy a handful myself.
Yeah.
I even think it will be interesting to look at potential grading of some of these cards. There are some unique gold foils. It's also the first true UPF, organized event. I want to have binder sets of these, maybe binder play sets, because it's such a cheap product. And I think it would just be great to memorialize a product similar to like Rhinar versus Dorinthia, which we've done a video on. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, anecdotally, one of the stores that I went to, who is pretty big on, like fostering not only like a great competitive scene at their, larger like tier 2 events like ProQuest and stuff, Guild Raven. But they're also interested in just like promoting the game of Flesh and Blood in general. I think the store owner is like trying to, every time there's a Magic player come in, try to at least like get them to try Flesh and Blood out.
Yep.
and he told me that he sold through 32 round the table on pre-order. So
Wow.
I asked him. I walked into the store. I had some store credit. I was planning to just like pick one up maybe. And I'm
Yeah.
like, hey, do you have like an X-ray? He's like, let me get back to you because all of the units that I ordered sold through before they even arrived.
That is pretty sick, and I'm so happy to hear that because Magic: The Gathering wishes they had this type of problem right now, but they
Yeah.
don't.
So I think in general, I hope that LSS continues to create, great products like this. I have felt for a long time that good productization is also, like really important for capturing a growing audience. And I think they did a great job with this set, or with not the set,
With
this
both of them,
product.
this is like vertically integrating and
Hmm.
on ramping the whole player base.
Yeah.
And I used the word on ramp when I was discussing it with Brian Gottlieb, and he
Hmm.
absolutely also reiterated the term on ramp because that was the vision. And I just have to say, there are so many members of the Flesh and Blood community looking at this from like a day to day, oh no, something happened that I don't like re type of thing to a week to month. And this also will tie into a topic that's upcoming because I know what the topics are.
Yeah.
But I just encourage everybody to look at the big picture.
Uh-huh.
And I'm looking at this as, and I've seen it, I said it since day one. I think you remember me telling you early on before you even showed up on camera on Fabled Hunters that I said, I see this game having a 10-year run in it at the very least. And as we move forward,
Yeah.
that time horizon will keep expanding because I've never been in it for, oh, look, my tunic went from $500 to 1,000. Let me sell my Findal Spring tunics. It's like,
Yeah.
no. Let me get as many of them at 500 because I know it'll go way past 1,000. I need to get them now.
Yeah.
And I somewhat still feel that way about the Wraith, Arc, and Crew first edition and alpha sets. So hence that's why we don't do that much content about collectability of those
Yeah.
sets because they're damn collectible and I'm not done collecting. Moving on.
Moving on.
You have the next topic?
Yeah, so the next topic, James White did a pretty extensive interview with Ivafidia,
Yep.
and I have some things that I kind of picked out. You guys, we'll include a link to the video if you check it out. I have some key points that I thought were very interesting that I wanted to kind of talk about. Number
Yeah.
one is this is like when they're talking about kind of the future vision for Flesh and Blood, something that you were alluding to. Number one, James said that they want to release 3 draftable sets every year, so that's very important for them. Increasing their total, store count of people carrying the game. And I looked at
4,000.
the numbers
Yeah.
that they posted. They said 4,000 stores in their network. And when you compare it to what the numbers are for WPN and Magic and Bandai and whatever that James talks about on the video, like Flesh and Blood's not too far off. So that was
You're
pretty
right there.
cool. That was pretty cool to see the numbers behind everything. And then
I have to roll it back to the first like 30 seconds of their video. That's what I was looking at.
yeah,
Because just as a consummate professional and somebody that values integrity and reputation above all, I have to give a shout out to Romain from Eye of Ophidia
hmm,
because he came out and he proactively gave the disclosure for like a minute and a half at the beginning of the episode that he's now working for or working with Legend Story Studios with
oh,
an
okay,
official title.
yeah,
And I looked at the comments because I was first 20 minutes. I was like, what's all this French? And I translated the French. And there were literally a bunch of like snarky pieces of insignificant internet lint that were like, oh, this is like fucking pretentious and whatever. It was in French, but you're fucking pretentious, Romain. We don't care about your title. Why do you even see the need? And then people came to his defense. Like, I'm glad that there are still good people and rational people in the world that aren't a bunch, like a bunch of human dumpster fires. Because Romain did the absolute right thing and he came up with disclosures.
Yeah.
Just like even something small, like, oh, Hasbro's going to shit the bed. I own Hasbro stock. Hasbro's going to shit the bed. Oh, because I own Hasbro stock and my self interest is involved, I'm going to have a negativity embargo on Fabled Hunters for Hasbro stock for the next
Yeah.
6 months. That was a disclosure because I felt I needed to disclose because I don't want people to question my motives or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
And Romain, for such an important piece of information, was like, I am interviewing James White. I am a content creator, but I also work with Legend Story Studios. I want everybody to know that so that I don't. And for him to get flack on his own comments, I mean, I just feel for the guy because we're in a day and age where there's so much trash that's so negative. And this guy's like just doing the right thing, trying to do the right thing, like the old
Yeah.
school way, not being all like private equity asset management company, BlackRock, World Economic Forum, and like, pulling the wool over people's eyes and gaslighting folks.
Yeah.
So again, props to Romain. I only watched 20, 25 minutes of his video because I only got 2 hours of sleep. But I will watch the other 45 or 35 minutes, and I look forward to probably after this because I wanna have it relevant. I'm going to try to squeeze the J Dubs for an interview in about 2 hours because I'm going to meet him in actually an hour and 15. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, the LSS is like planning to expand out to other countries. I think a lot of the discourse that goes on Flesh and Blood on social media is largely U.S. centric, and so I think as people who live in the U.S. sometimes we don't have like the full picture of what LSS is doing, and they can't like always do things that are just like in our interest. They're also in the interest of growing their game out, and so
Protecting their intellectual property.
we'll talk about that in a second. Um, but
I studied up, Yuanji, as tired as I was.
yeah, yeah.
It worked a long day. I took notes and I studied up.
So we'll talk about that in a second. But I do think that like the interests of all these other regions that are developing out is probably just as important. And I think James said on the interview that they're trying to host more and more events around the world. And honestly, like I think that would be like a great thing. And like some of my best memories from playing card games competitively were when like Wizards of the Coast was throwing like Grand Prix every other week or every 3 weeks in around the world and stuff. And I think that I don't think that Flesh and Blood is going to have callings at that frequency in the near future, but I think it's really cool that they're working towards making the game that playing the game at a high level accessible to people around the world. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
It's only an elephant for you, bro. It's only an elephant for you.
Yeah, only an elephant for me. I think this along the same veins of when I was complaining to you about how the set was Dragon's Maze.
Okay.
I tend to not have like very explosive, I guess, like public commentary on things. Most of the time,
you
I
let
just
me hear it.
Yeah, I just talk to you about it. But I think it's important because I wanted to say I think like similar to like Bright Lights, my reaction to Bright Lights. As human beings, we always have like an emotional response to things.
Yep, a very visceral one.
And then so you're kind of one of my like sounding boards. I just like rant to you,
okay.
But I don't.
If I may, if you don't mind,
yeah.
I just want to tell all the viewers and eventually James and even James's wife and daughter, I believe, watched some episodes of Fabled Hunters.
Okay.
Like Yuanji, you came to me, you're like, you're meeting James, aren't you? Can you put in a word about this? This is wrong. And I'm like, I'm like, bro, I love you, man, but I'm absolutely not putting in a word. We are not in agreement on this topic. I'm on James's side, and I know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
He's a CEO, I'm a CEO.
Yeah.
So, but let's let's dive in, man. Draft
Yeah,
Fab. Is Fab Draft.
Draft Fab got
Draft
shut down the morning of October 2nd, and basically the guy who made the site got a cease and desist from the IP office department, whatever, of Legend Story Studio, saying that the website was infringing on their what's it called, their digital assets, or the use of. And LSS has like a pretty clearly stated but intentionally vague kind of description of what constitutes fair use for their assets, and almost all of the use of their assets, even to artists that they hire to sell like art prints or whatever, it's all revocable. At any point in time, Legend Story Studios can pull the plug, saying, "Hey, you can't like keep using our IP."
So it's a right. It's a right to everybody not named Legend Story Studios. It is a privilege granted to everybody not named Legend Story Studios who uses the IP. You're treading on somebody else's property, right?
Yep.
That's that. I'm not trying to like astroturf this.
No.
Argument. We see things differently. I get your perspective. I would say that you probably are like, look, I'm a captain or a leader of a very prominent Flesh and Blood, very competitive team.
Yeah.
FaBled Runaways. Let's go Runaways. But your team uses Draft Fab to optimize your gameplay, simulate draft gameplay, and it's a very valuable tool. However, I do remember a day, or not too many months ago, where you were like, Saint, hey, you're going to buy cases anyway. Can you like spot us some cases so our team can play drafts in person? And that's good. Whereas Draft Fab, you kind of don't need to buy those cases anymore. Even if I'm the one buying the cases, you're consuming them, right? There's going to be a monetary value there. There's going to be a monetary delta, whether you like it or not. Right?
Yeah, I have like a couple of views on this. So historically, and I'm not exactly sure how this necessarily translates into the games industry, but there have been several instances of we'll just like call it piracy or whatever you want to call it, and
like Lorcana right now,
talking about like the effects that it has on I guess the success of companies to operate in the space. And I'm trying to figure out like what's like the most like nuanced like way to look at this is, because ultimately I think for me it's a question of whether or not this will have a positive impact on the game as a whole. So the way that I view Draft Fab as a simulation is that it is a tool that allows people to come together and play games of Flesh and Blood Draft that otherwise would not have been able to do so, either because of financial means, either because they don't have accessibility where they live, either because the people who they want to play with are, maybe across the world.
Okay.
And Runaways Discord, for example, I just had to pay to unlock queuing for more than 500, active members. And so these are like 500 active members, that span across the world. We have a lot of people from Europe, and I think some people from Latin America, Asia, and North America, being able to play games together. And I think it would be disingenuous to say that online play, even though Flesh and Blood, is very much about promoting gameplay in the Flesh and Blood in person, in stores, at the kitchen table, whatever. I think it would be disingenuous to say that online play has not had a positive impact on Flesh and Blood. A lot of the interest in Flesh and Blood was generated through online skirmishes during the pandemic, webcam play, TTS play, things that don't necessarily directly translate to people purchasing boxes of Flesh and Blood, but nonetheless, Flesh and Blood as a product became very successful. I don't want to say because of online play, but maybe in part contributed by online play.
Early days, I have no objection to that whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I completely agree with you. pandemic days, you're absolutely right. But I think Flesh and Blood as a game is turning the corner. And I think we're in a different era. And I think we might be in a situation where the Talishars of the world were in prior to a certain cutoff time,
Yeah.
and that this is LSS's line in the sand. And I'm a believer that at some point, at some size of your organization, at some maturity, that you do need to draw a line in the sand. It sucks that it's this guy, but I'd rather it be a guy who's early on. I'd rather it be a guy with 7 Patreons than, platform that's, hosting like 10,000 games a day like Talishar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe they're grandfathered. The old ones are grandfathered.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk about, because I was doing some thinking about this, like after having the initial emotional response that I did, of examples that I can think of in other industries. So I guess like the couple that I thought of initially was you have the what's it called, in like sports events. You have people who pirate access to viewing like streams. Like you have like pay-per-view fights that get streamed illegally.
UFC. Yep.
You have events that are supposed to be paywalled behind, like a channel, like a paid channel, whatever, that gets streamed illegally. And the question is like
Scrambled
does
prawn back in the days.
Yeah, like
those of the 80s and 90s will know.
And then I think the other thing that I know of from past experience is I think in the anime industry, a big part of initially getting people to kind of watch anime was kind of like illegally getting like a rip of the Japanese broadcast and then having like fan or community created subtitles. And now there's like a whole kind of like paid industry,
right? Funimation.
Yeah, but even before before Crunchyroll was established, now Crunchyroll monetizes it, and some of that money goes back to the studios. I think that before it was just like entirely community run, and so I guess like the my question, and maybe like you'll have some input on this as like somebody who is more deeply involved in business than the average person, is like how much damage is there to spreading general awareness and use of your product if you don't get like an immediate like bottom line, like transaction or whatnot.
Okay. I think you and many others will think about it like immediate bottom line. It's not what Draft Fab is doing to take away from the bottom line right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's the message that is sent if a Draft Fab is allowed, and then there's a Draft Fab 2 or a Draft Fab 3 or a Talishar 2 or a Talishar 3. To give you a story, brief lesson from my house counsel. He's a Jewish American from Brooklyn. He's served on a line of lawyers that have served some notorious Italian mafiosos. He basically told me, he's like, Saint, in terms of war or in terms of a rivalry, there are 2 reasons, he says, to eliminate someone. The first reason is to solve a problem. The second reason is to send a message. And he breaks it down. So do we really have a problem? It's like, is this person a problem? No, they're annoying. We don't want other people to be like this person. Okay, so if he's not a problem, then you go to number 2. You're doing this to send a message. And I think it fits because James White has been touted for his mafia-like loyalty. And I share some of these, I share some of this mindset. I believe that Legend Story Studios is taking this time to consolidate, like ball their fingers up in a fist and say, guys, this is the end of the heyday of everybody gets to do whatever they want. Everybody gets to make what platforms, because, you crush your fist down on Talishar. That's probably going to piss off 10, 20,000 players at least.
Yeah.
Right. But thing about Draft Fab is there's only literally 7 Patreons, right? He's making presumably $4 or $8 per Patreon. So it's $28 on the low, $56 on the high. this is going to be a wall. This is the line in the sand of Legend Story Studios saying, hey, no more passion projects that are digital without our express consent, right? And you kind of want to send a message with, I'm sorry to the guy, nothing personal, it's just business. I'm not the guy that did it, but you kind of want to murk or, execute the one that's got less collateral damage to show any other big players in the ecosystem that, hey, we're not just going to let our IP get compromised. You better come ask for permission. You better, in the old Mulberry Street days, you better pay your protection money or else, right? Or something like that. You better pay your due. You better kiss the ring. And they're big enough now that, guess what? Their IP is valuable. They're worldwide recognized. They're recognized within their country as well.
Yeah.
And, well, that's their opponent is very, very small. And I'm not trying to say they're getting, they're being turned into a scapegoat, but it's to send a message to all the potential other people and let them know, like, whoa, am I going to contribute that much of my time going into a passion project where I could presumably get into legal trouble, right?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to give you the
no, yeah, I hear what you're saying. My perspective is that I think we've seen in a lot of instances recently where, I'm just thinking about, like, for example, like NALCS, for where, like, the company that is in charge of this game takes, like, a very
big loss.
No. I was gonna say, I was gonna say that they're taking, like, a very, like, draconian, like, firm stance towards the, like, whatever is in the scope of utilizing their IP, utilizing their game. If for all the people who aren't, like, super versed on the history of League of Legends, like, Riot Games has been, since the conception of LCS, like, very heavy-handed, very, like, keeping a very tight fist on, control over organized League of Legends play. That's why there's not a lot of community leagues, etc., that get formed as a result. And, there's pros and cons to this type of approach, but my feeling is, in today's day and age, having such a tight control and not really letting your community develop out your game, like, you have more control over it, but I think at the same time you have a lot more responsibility, and things can go sour if the market conditions aren't great. And I saw, like, an interesting article recently about how FGC the fighting game community as a whole in this economic downswing is doing a lot better than traditional esports like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, whatever, because of the fact that they're a lot more community driven, more grassroots oriented, and there's definitely cons to this approach as well. Like, fighting games are definitely not as big. Historically, when people were making millions of dollars in League of Legends, like, people in the fighting game community are playing for, like, thousands of dollars, right?
Thousands, yep.
And I'm toning down my response, but I just want to give everybody who's watching the video, like, different perspectives on how to kind of think about this topic.
I'd like to add one more perspective as well.
Go ahead.
I don't want to single you or the FaBled Runaways out because we are allies. We're literally, like, brother sister channels and organizations. So forget that your organization has used Draft Fab. I want to ask the viewers and the entire community to think about it. Like, the onus should be on them to support something, because I believe far too many people are free riding everything possible, whether it be Talishar, whether it be Draft Fab, whether it be FabDB, whether it be Fabled Hunters, or any other channels. And, like, the fact that there's only 7 Patreons and that guy's maxing out at $28 to $56 and putting out software that a community can use, and presumably hundreds if not thousands of prospective pros would use, like, the nerve of those hundreds to thousands of people not supporting this guy. If this guy had hundreds of Patreons,
Yeah.
and if this guy had actual support, and if people put their money where their mouth was and gave the guy, forget about $8 a month, just $4 a month, then there wouldn't be this situation where he'd be so small that he can just get snuffed out and people are complaining. Like the people that have the energy to complain, if you have the energy to go up and complain and show up on like Riddler Man's channel or show up and leave a message on Fabled Hunters or give us a downvote because you hate us, you hate me for my fucking opinion. Like, dude, you should have just gone and paid $4 or $8. And if you had like 700 supporters on Patreon, then maybe that would be a base that would be a little more intimidating and would indicate scale to Legend Story Studios. I mean, I haven't had too much sleep, but hopefully that point makes sense, right?
Yeah.
There's also the responsibility of the community not to just free ride everything possible because they're like, okay, we're snuffing out a $50 channel, but my analytics department, which I believe nowadays James has to have, it's probably somebody working under Chris Pierce, they're doing the math and they're like, hey, if 500 pros, each buy 2 boxes less, and that's 1,000 boxes, that's like $80,000 less, in preparation to Worlds, in preparation to whatever season's coming up, skirmish season 69, or I don't know. I don't know what's in the competitive circuit, but they're doing cost benefit analysis, and they're like, okay, sorry, $56 guy, but Legend Story Studios is going to lose $100,000 in the next 3 months, if not 4. And people are like, oh, LSS is in a bad financial situation. Da da. No, they're not. This is just business.
Mhm.
Like, look, the community only values Draft Fab at $30 to $60, let's call it. Round numbers, $30 to $60 a month. That's all they value the guy at. They're working the guy to the bone, right? He's putting out a piece of IP that he's creating as a passion project that actually works and is providing utility. But, right, because so few people actually want to support him, there's not that critical mass indicating to LSS that this is not something that you want to, this is something that you don't want to touch, or this is off limits.
Yeah,
whereas Talishar does, right? I just think that in my thought process, this is that line in the sand, and this prevents a Draft Fab 2, a 3, a 4.
Yeah.
And sorry to Mr. Draft Fab founder, it's not personal, it's only business, right?
Yeah.
And they had to send a message, and he loses $56 a month, but he's still very appreciated. I don't know the guy, but I will buy him a meal at Worlds because he said he'll be at Worlds. I'd gladly. Do you know his name? I don't know his name.
Yeah,
Sorry.
his name is Mark Henderson. He's from.
Henderson
He
with an H or K?
H. Henderson.
Mark Henderson. Okay, so if Mark Henderson gets this message, I will buy you a meal at Worlds just as a thank you, because guess what? That meal will probably cover 6 to 8 months of your Patreon fees. I've never even used your software, and I appreciate you for your efforts. And this is I'm sorry on behalf of the FaB community. So hopefully, buy you a meal, buy you a couple beers. We can, get rip-roaring drunk in Barcelona, and there you go. But that token and that gesture, unfortunately, is more than the remainder of the Flesh and Blood community has given to Mark Henderson in the past 6 months or more. You get my point?
Yeah,
Do you understand
I understand what you're saying, and we could be talking about this for days.
Okay.
I wanted to give all the viewers kind of not only our perspectives, but like a lot of different perspectives to kind of think about the topic.
Yuanji, we can agree to disagree, and
Yeah.
I know we're running over. I still have about an hour and 9 minutes before I have to be in front of Mr. White at the new Legend Story Studios office.
Sounds good.
But I think you missed a key topic.
Oh, yes.
Right? About a certain cat in Jacksonville?
Yes. Okay. Oops.
That's a big one, bro.
That is a big one. So, a certain person acquired 69% ownership of
Mr. Alpha Investments.
Yeah,
Rudy,
of PCG. We got caught up in the sauce. So, PCG US, just to give a little bit of context, PCG US, PCG was started by Matt Rogers and
Robert
Miller in New Zealand. I think they first opened an office also in Australia. And yep. I forget if the U.S. office was open first or if they opened one in APAC. But the U.S. office, I think, was purchased later on by certain fireballs.
Certain fireballs, certain
Yeah,
dead card shops.
yeah.
Let's not get back into that. I
Um,
just don't have a good time talking about
yeah,
that part.
so I think you had a lot of reservations initially about recommending PCG US because there were some quality control issues. Uh,
Early on,
yeah, early
absolutely.
on. But now I think things have moved on. Rudy of Alpha Investments has purchased a majority share of PCG US. I think
Well,
they
let me
have. Oh
disclose
yeah, go
that
ahead.
I, St. Hung, do not hold any shares, any equity in PCG US, because just in the vein of disclosure, uh,
Hmm.
proactive disclosure, I do not. However, I am a consultant. However, I spent time. I'm just that passionate about this project, and I was that passionate about taking away this project from its predecessors
Yeah.
that I flew down to Florida and put in 18 to 20-hour days just to get this moving forward because it's the right thing to do for the community. So continue, please.
Yeah, so now I think their office is relocating to Florida.
Done. It's done.
Yeah,
I was there. Yep.
yeah, so their offices are in Florida now. Hopefully, there's better stewardship of the PCG brand of, the quality that they want to be known for.
Mhm.
And, I have high hopes when we did our PCG slabs review from I think you got them graded in New Zealand. Initially
Yes.
the white
I would
cards.
only get them graded in
Yeah,
New
yeah,
Zealand,
yeah.
especially
Uh,
after Worlds. Yep.
yeah. So the product that PCG is coming out with is, I would say, pushing the boundaries of the grading community. The
Yep.
products that they're making. Beckett has their style. PSA has
Yep.
their style. CGC makes kind of unreally unwanted slabs,
Wanted
whatever
slab. No
whatever
premium slab.
whatever the case is. But pretty much all the grading companies have kind of been, doing their one thing that they've been doing. And
Yep.
PCG, I think, as far as I know, is the only company that's really pushing forward and trying to make new products, new innovations in this space.
Yep. They're innovating and they're remaining consistent and they're not letting any market dynamics change their standards. They're not compromising on their standards. They're not abandoning their standards like CGC has. We can't really talk about Beckett other than that we're great supporters and we're Beckett official partners. But
Yeah.
sometimes I'm not in agreement with all of their grading, and I'll just leave it at that. Sometimes I'm not happy with their turnaround times, and I wish they would innovate at least once in these 30 years. Beckett would, and
Hmm.
then PSA. I'm just not a paper label and no subgrades type of guy. Although PSA is run by Nat Turner, and that's another thing. That's a big thing. See, PCG is privately owned. It's owned by enthusiasts that actually love trading cards.
Yeah.
Rudy's one. Matt Rogers is one. Obviously, he's a Flesh and Blood multi-year champion. Robert Miller is one. He plays Pokemon and Dragon Ball Super with his kids, and they're true stewards of the TCG community. And all of these, both of their interests are privately held. And not only that, like you look at CGC, which is the worst of the bunch. CGC is literally held by Blackstone.
Yeah.
They're held by Blackstone. Blackstone is the grandfather of BlackRock. Like, are you kidding me? This is one of the worst private equity companies in the world. BGS is also held by private equity. BGS goes up to Beckett Media on one side. Their other arm is Dragon Shield, which is owned by Arcane Tinman. They're both owned by a shadowy private equity organization headquartered in New York called Entrust Global. And the number one, Collectors Universe slash PSA is owned by a multi-billionaire hedge fund manager, right? PSA, Collectors Universe.
Yeah.
So look at that. There's none of those organizations scream integrity. None of those organizations scream stewardship. None of those organizations scream consistency or quality. But thankfully, I can be a consultant and a supporter of PCG now, and I'm a supporter of PCG worldwide. I had my little reservations due to the card shop dead era,
Yeah.
but we're past that. I've personally seen Rudy. I've personally seen his onboarding. I've personally seen his standards. I personally get hit up by Rudy, like, why isn't this working, Saint? I was like, I don't know. What about this website programming? Bro, I don't know. But I will find out for you.
Yeah,
Because he's not big on social media.
yeah,
So
yeah.
sometimes I get a good old analog text message and I have to contact my bros over
Yeah.
at PCGHQ. And yeah, damn. He really doesn't have Messenger. I need to write that down somewhere. But regardless, I think this mirrors my values. Like my values in 2020 were all about look what Hasbro is doing. Look what Wizards of the Coast is doing. They're exploiting their community, and we can build a community from the grassroots.
Yeah.
And I say that I'm rather fortunate to be part and to, watch Legend Story Studios grow Flesh and Blood from a sapling to not a big tree, but a tree. It's still a tree. It's not an oak tree. It's not a redwood, but it's growing. And I would say PCG being the official grading partner of Legend Story Studios and Flesh and Blood is the same concept. They're a sapling right now. And right now they're up against redwoods and oak trees, and they're fighting. And they're fighting with integrity. They're fighting with quality. And they have my complete support. Yuanji, you and I are going to talk one day about getting FaBled Hunters, presumably you, as a member of the PCG US hub for submissions. And that will just further support our Patreons, and it'll further support the TCG community and the Flesh and Blood community. So, I'm spending 3 to 4 days out of my 8 days in New Zealand, literally at PCG headquarters.
Okay.
And I've got nothing but amazing things to say. I've already spent 2 days there.
Yeah.
I was introduced to mince and cheese pie by
Oh yeah,
Robert
dude,
Miller.
those things are very addictive.
Oh, you've had them before?
Yeah. When I went to New Zealand for the Auckland Calling, I made eating like a pie, like one of those like New Zealand meat pies is like one of my like to-do list bucket items.
Oh my God. Yeah. I didn't even know what to expect. It's like an empanada, but better with like crispy, like
you might have a continent of people furious at you for that one, but it is very good.
No, I'm just saying, man. A New York empanada is already pretty damn good.
Yeah,
I go to Sophie's Cuban to get my empanadas, or I go to my local Havana Central Cuban restaurant and get my empanadas. But like the mince and cheese pie, in my opinion, in my very limited opinion, is more delicious than any empanada I've ever had.
How dare you,
Saint? Is that fair? Don't burn me at the stake.
How dare you?
Is this the most controversial thing we can make in this episode that I've said in this episode after all that? Well, regardless, hats off to PCG, hats off to Legend Story Studios for, staying the course, doing the right thing. And final thing, I have a meeting with the founder of Sorcery, and I will leave it at that.
Exciting. All right. Thank you, thank you everyone for staying tuned for this lengthy. I think these videos always go the distance, but
we had a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys found all the perspectives interesting, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Remember to like, comment, subscribe, twiddle that notification button. It was a hell of a time. Later, guys.
Bye.
Expect that.
Well, you probably most likely will.
Really?
Yeah. If you're doing even 1,000 slabs a month, you'll be having 2 people operating the machine. Yeah. But I mean, what we can do is either push this to the left and have the working space both in here, or we can move this to the right a little bit and then have both working spaces to the left.
I'd probably say have each section working separate so the orders don't get mixed.
That's right, yeah. So we can...
Because if they're both in the middle, there's a chance you're not paying attention, you can put a card in a different bin or something.
Yeah.
in my theory.
Yeah, so we can move them slightly to the right and then create
And this, we can order drawers and put all these spare parts and things in.
And in the middle, we can have the cases as well, and there's all the equipment, so they can like sweep there.
Like we can put them like the shelving up here and all the parts.
But yeah, you'll get 2 people operating. Maybe not at the very start because we're going to have them tuned to different cases. But as soon as these run out, which they will run out quickly, then it'll be a retune to the new case.